Hello, everybody. Welcome to week 8. After this week, you will be halfway done with the class. So congratulations. I know it seems like a long stretch, but you're getting there. And so that's great. I am hopefully going to be starting a class next week that is just an 8-week version of this class. So imagine this crammed into half the time, and I think you'll appreciate and be grateful, probably in some ways, that you're doing the 16-week version of this. It's a little more spread out and manageable in some ways. So this week you are going to we're going to switch gears here. So if you think about this recap, and we've done through jazz and blues, and we've gone into rhythm and blues, and we've gone into rock and roll, and we've gone into the British invasion and the British blues revival, and power pop, and I almost said grunge, and garage, which is the precursor to punk, which is the precursor to grunge. And so we've been carrying through this line, but there's another path that really goes back to the very beginning. In fact, arguably, it probably goes back to the beginning, or at least a long, long time, which is folk music. And then this one book that I have, I can't remember. You can see, I don't know if you've noticed, and I don't know how long this will last. I've been going through, kind of rearranging my library and doing things, so you will see right there I changed the books periodically, just for fun mostly, and then I've been adding them into my reading list. So, sometimes I'll throw in a question like, hey, who are the people on the books behind me? Maybe I'll do that now. And so folk music, really quite simply, is music of the folks. So it is just regular music, but there's certain things about it that are important. One of the main things about folk music is certainly in the traditions that we think of, that comes from Europe, that comes over through here, and it goes back. All cultures pretty much have some sort of folk music with them, most all of them, if not all of them. And there are some overlaps. I may have talked way back early about folk music versus cultural ritual music. And one of the big differences with folk music is that folk music can also be for entertainment, where cultural ritual music has an extra amount of depth to it. It's connected to something else: birth, death, weddings, war, whatever. So folk music could just be entertainment. It could be storytelling. It could be dancing. It could be all sorts of things. So when we think about folk music, one of the things that's really important to understand when you're learning about and listening to folk music is that the words are the most important aspect. And so most all of the time. So if you think about music that we've been listening to up till now, rhythm and blues, and by the way, blues is a type of folk music. So when you have this stuff like rhythm and blues and rock and roll and stuff like that, where it's really more for entertainment, it's not so much about what's being said, although it could be, as much as what's the melody, what's the rhythm, can you dance to it, all that sort of good stuff. Folk music is always has an emphasis on the words. What is being said? What is the story being told? What is the emotion being conveyed? So it's always amazing to me when I would teach this class and I would talk to students about lyrics, and so many times I'd get people saying, oh yeah, I don't really pay much attention to the words. Not all the case, and certainly in a lot of pop music, pop music in particular, maybe the words aren't that particularly good or whatever. If y'all remember the song Happy, there was a line that always just drove me nuts, still drives me nuts: happy like a room without a roof. That makes no sense. There's nothing to that. It probably just rhymed and fit and had the right number of syllables, and so it worked. When you get into folk music, there's a lot of crafting that goes on into the words, what's being told. So there are some singers, like, say, Bob Dylan behind me, that you may listen to and go, oh, that guy doesn't have a great voice. That's true. But what he's saying is profound and deep. A lot of folk songs, there are story folk songs where they just basically tell you a story. And that tradition literally goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then there's writings that get more poetic, that there's much more involved in terms of the intricacies, and Bob Dylan is a great example of that. So I just want you, as you go into this week, and I want you thinking through, and you hopefully already saw that when we talked a couple weeks ago about Dylan's influence on the Beatles, that there was a new level of depth taking place in the songwriting, and a lot of that comes from Dylan. That comes in not just to the Beatles, but really, that you can see the impact of Bob Dylan on rock music afterwards. Even today, if you can, there's always like the pop, rap stuff and hip hop stuff. And then there's the writers that are really writing deep stuff. And a lot of that is because, this idea that an artist, that a writer would write their own songs and perform their own songs. Hopefully you learned that 2 weeks ago, that was a big deal with the Beatles. When we talk about the significance of the Beatles and how important they were, the idea that a band would write its own songs, record its own songs, performs its own songs was really significant. And again, you have the same kind of thing in Dylan. So when you're talking about those big game changers, you're talking about Elvis, and you're talking about certainly someone like James Brown, which we'll learn more about. But the Beatles and Bob Dylan, they're super high up there. Even the way that they later impacted what was going on with the Beach Boys and all other folks. So you're going to learn about folk music, and I'm not going to go a whole lot into that other than to really emphasize that it's important to pay attention to the words of what's being said. I really want you in one of the modules. I really want you to go through all the modules, and I can see a lot of you. I can tell like how much time you've spent online, that you're basically just like clicking through them. I really recommend that you don't do that. I can't control that. I don't know. And if you sort of figured out like, oh, well, if I've reached out to you and said, look, you've only put 4 or 5 hours into this class, I know full well that you could just set Canvas up and let it run, and then the time goes. And so it's not about that. It's really about what you're learning. But I choose everything in these modules to help reinforce the book, to help reinforce the songs, to help reinforce everything. Even sometimes when I'm reading the answers to the discussions and the reflection observations, I'm like, I don't know that they've listened to the music or gone through there, because that should inform your answers. Certainly in this section. So there's a great video that's in here for Dylan when he won the Nobel Prize, Pulitzer. Why am I blanking on it right now? You'll find out, you'll see why he's coming from where he's coming from, and how. And the depth that he's reaching. So really pay attention to the words. And again, little reminder on your assignments, use songs as examples, use albums as examples. Don't just say, the Beatles were a great band. Say the Beatles were a great band, and that's exemplified in the rhythm of, I Want to Hold Your Hand, or in the diverse instruments that were used in songs off of Sgt. Pepper's, like When I'm 64 versus Within You, Without You versus A Day in the Life, where they used an orchestra. Those things are really showing me what you're learning, and that you're putting all these things together. So out of Dylan, you have this real folk explosion, and I want you to think about the audience. Who was Dylan appealing to versus some of the other styles? Because chronologically, what's happening with Bob Dylan is going along at the same time that you have soul and Motown and pop and the Beach Boys, and then eventually crossing over through the Beatles. Dylan's still alive. He's still out there doing it. So be mindful of that as you're going through it, and take the time to dig into the songs. Dylan alone is a treasure trove. You could spend an entire life. It would be so easy to teach a semester on Bob Dylan alone and the powerful songs that are there. And so I really encourage you to take the time. His influence was so significant that he ended up creating the genre folk rock, and you're going to learn about that. And I want you to be mindful of how that came about and who all came in there. Dylan's one of the few people that actually starts multiple genres, because we're going to learn in another week or so about country rock, which is also something that he had a hand in starting. And then you're going to learn about the singer-songwriters. And singer-songwriters came out of the folk scene, but folk musicians and folk artists, they tend to write outwardly. They tend to write about the world around them. They tend to focus on, the oppressed, the unrepresented, folks like, there's a lot of workers' rights. You're going to learn about almanac singers and the Weavers and their connections to more of what we would now consider like the left-leaning side of politics. And then you're going to the singer-songwriters, however, you're going to learn about all of that. And I want you to think about that as you're learning and getting ready for those assignments. And then the singer-songwriters, who are much more introspective. So where the folk artists are looking outwardly, looking outwardly, the singer-songwriters are looking inwardly. So where you, with the singer-songwriters, you're going to get a lot of I and me and us and they. It's their personal struggles, their personal situations, but it can be quite deep. Sometimes even painful. They're not writing about, the what you would get in the pop songs. It might be, much darker than that. And then I want you to be thinking about, with folk music and with the singer-songwriters, how does that impact today, right? How is that, when you have folk artists that are writing about the world that's around them and commenting on the world that's around them, are there people doing that today? This is going to be one of your assignments, and I can tell you right now, yes, there are. And I can also tell you right now that you don't want to just be thinking about folk music. There are other genres that function similarly. And if you think about the messages that are going through, this is not a hard connection to make. I'm not going to make that connection for you right now, but it's there. So think about what you're learning and apply it. That's always what I want. And again, use examples. That's it for now. As usual, there are various questions embedded in this. And have a great week. Again, we're in the roller coaster that is October weather, where it's going to be rainy one day, 2 days later it's in the 80s, and as we push to the end of the month, where it starts to settle in a little bit and we get those chillier nights. So take good care, have a great week, and we'll talk soon.